Whenever the spirit moves, yeah. Deep breath, and I'll start your timer.
I would like to start out with a little word association. If everyone is okay with that. Who wants to be? Daryl.
Yeah.
You're from the Bay Area, right?
Yeah.
Golden State.
Warriors.
Okay. Cheyenne, you're from San Diego, right?
Mm-hmm.
San Diego.
The beach.
San Diego.
The Padres.
There we go. Anyone else want to try, or should I move on here? Do you get the point I'm trying to make? Sports, they're not just a competition of athletics. They are a pillar of our society. They are something that a lot of people get around because it makes them feel bigger than just them.
Mm.
It's a communal experience. It's a shared experience. It's something that we can all enjoy together, just like fashion or anything else of any other genre. So what if the name of your sports team that you rooted for your entire life was challenged? What if it was all of a sudden threatened to be taken away? Does the name define what the sports franchise is? Or is it Steph Curry? Or is it your favorite Padres player? I don't really know any Padres players. Not very good. But
They're not.
yeah. But that is a question that is come up right now, and that's why I'm discussing Native American culture within sports today. Now, I would like to go to the historical analysis because I am very curious, and I've been studying this semester, on how the histories of two franchises, the Syracuse University Athletics and the Washington Redskins, have kind of been constructed in a way that kind of defines how complex and how diverse this issue is that we're kind of debating today. So I would like to start out with the Washington Redskins. They started out as the Boston Braves in 1932, and they got their name simply because they shared a stadium with a baseball team named the Boston Braves. Now, the baseball team got their name from their owner, who was a member of Tammany Hall, which, I don't know if you learned about in history class when you were in high school, was a political organization that was pretty shady, but Tammany Hall was derived from Chief Tammond and used a lot of Native American aspects within their political organization. They had longhouses, their seal was a chief. So the Boston Braves owner decided to become the Braves because he was a part of that. And George Preston Marshall, when he had a football team, just decided to name his team the Braves. The next year, though, they moved to Fenway Park. And Preston Marshall decides it's time for a name change. He could go any way he wants to. He's not a Native American. And he never really showed any particular fondness to their culture, historically through text. But the coach he hired was named William Lone Star Dietz. And William Lone Star Dietz was a proclaimed Native American. But it was later found out that he was a fraud and not actually Native American. But whether Preston Marshall knew this or not, he decided to just go full throttle with the Native American culture within his games. It was a spectacle. He wanted William Dietz to wear a headdress on the sidelines when he was coaching the team. He wanted his players to wear face paint. He liked the collegiate aspect of college football, so he wanted a band, and the band wore headdresses and stuff. He wanted to make the most Native American team, I think, in America at the time. And he probably successfully did. So they moved to Washington. The name sticks. And it snowballs into what we see today is in the news, this debate over the Washington Redskins, should they change their name or not. So I have a couple pictures here. And I wanted a collage. I just want anyone who has ever seen the Washington Redskins to get a full experience of it right here. And today, they're valued at $3.1 billion and have an annual income of $482 million. And this is basically Preston Marshall's vision snowballed, over 80 years later. We have people in headdresses watching the games and painting their faces red. We have still the symbol being used. The symbol is very, very old. It's been used for a while. It's in their 50-yard line right there. And players wearing red jerseys. I mean, this was his vision, and his decisions he made based on not only just the baseball team that played in the same stadium as him, but just all the way back to Tammany Hall is really interesting, and why it's not very simple usually why these two team names become. But he keeps it, the current owner Dan Snyder keeps it, and we all read the news today about what's going on there. So I would like to move on and talk about another sports franchise that has a similar upbringing to the Washington Redskins, but at the same time has a very different ending. That is Syracuse University. The private university, Private Research Institute in upstate New York, started athletics in 1870 with a football team like the Washington Redskins. In 1872, the university made their first colors. It was pea green and pink. And surprisingly, they didn't feel too hot about that. So they decided to change them in 1890 just to orange. And orange is still the color they use today. Oh, did you raise your hand?
I did. I'm sorry. That's 5 minutes, so you still have 2 minutes.
Oh,
No, I'm just giving you your time signal.
I know where that is. But they tried out a lot of mascots. None of them worked. They tried Trojan. They tried a bunch of animals, but none of them stuck. But finally, in 1931, their student newspaper, the Syracuse Orange Peel, had an article that claimed that the remains of a Native American chief from the Onondaga tribe of the Iroquois Nation, his remains were buried under one of their academic buildings. Now, this article became very popular in the university and eventually snowballed into what became their mascot, which is the Saltine Warrior. Now, there's a couple issues here. One, the article was fake. There was never any remains buried under any building. And two, the Saltine Warrior isn't even a real thing. The saltine came from the salt deposits in the Syracuse area, and the warrior obviously comes from the remains. But this name stuck, and people really felt very strong about it, and the Saltine Warrior, kind of made these graphics that Syracuse had for over 50 years. And we see a similar thing to the Washington Redskins here with a kind of animated depiction of a warrior of some sort, of Native American. And then also here, it's very ironic because the Syracuse Orange Peel was the newspaper that first published the article about the Native American remains. And now you see that they've fully gone with the Saltine Warrior culture in Syracuse University. And this name became popular, and they stuck with it. And in the 1950s, the Lambda Chi fraternity, one of their brothers decided to wear a Native American costume to one of the football games. And that created their first physical mascot of the Saltine Warrior, which was portrayed by Lambda Chi brothers for the next 50 years. But then in the 1970s, the fall of 1978, there was very little Native American students at Syracuse University. But the little that they were, they formed a student organization called Onquenhanwa. And they started becoming irritated with the depiction of Native American culture that was widespread throughout the university. One of them did not like the way the mascot was portrayed and felt it had no really relation to what they were brought up with, and also affected the way that Native American education was taught at the university just because of this mascot. So in the fall of 1978, they started actively protesting the mascot. And here, I'd like to show one of the Lambda Chi brothers, because this is important, portraying the Saltine Warrior at one of the games. So, obviously, because there is no such thing as a Saltine Warrior, this is just a very generic Native American costume. But with all this strong culture around the Saltine Warrior at Syracuse University, the protesters from the student organization met with the president, Marvin Eggers, and together they came up with a plan to sit down with the Lambda Chi brothers and with the local Onondaga tribe, some heads of the tribe, and some other members of them. And they had a joint session that lasted for hours that resulted in, when the spring of 1978, the Saltine Warrior was removed immediately, effective immediately. And Syracuse went on for the next 20 years until 1995, having no mascot again, until they finally got the Orange Men and the Orange Woman, which turned into the Orange, what we know today, which is Otto the Orange. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a football game. But it didn't take much protesting. They didn't have to remove any copyrights. They just kind of did it, And in conclusion, I've told you about the histories of two major, financially successful and popular sports franchises, the Washington Redskins and the Syracuse Orange, formerly the Syracuse Saltine Warriors. They both have similar upbringings with myth and myth conceptions, but their endings are very different. The Washington Redskins today are still holding tight to their name, while the Syracuse Saltine Warriors gave theirs up almost immediately. And that really goes back to, what does the name have to relate to the sports team itself? The Washington Redskins would disagree with the Syracuse Orange about what that means. Thank you guys very much.